Sophie had always been the kind of girl people underestimated. With her soft smile and graceful presence on the cheer squad, she seemed like the embodiment of gentleness. She was quick to help, quick to laugh, and never once raised her voice. To outsiders, she was the perfect teammate, always reliable, always willing to hold someone steady during a stunt, always clapping enthusiastically for others when they nailed a routine. But to a few girls on the team, her quietness wasn't strength, it was weakness. They whispered about her during water breaks, made jokes when she wasn't looking, and rolled their eyes when she offered suggestions. Part of it was because she wasn't like them. Sophie didn't come from the same neighborhood, didn't spend summers at the same beach clubs, and didn't post endless selfies with carefully curated captions. She was the daughter of a combat veteran who had spent more time overseas than at home while she was growing up. They called her Army Brat, in sing-song voices, sometimes when she was in earshot, sometimes just loud enough that she knew the words were meant for her. Sophie pretended it didn't matter, but every time the nickname stuck in the air, it cut a little deeper. Still, she endured it. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to be like them. Her dad had raised her on the principles of discipline and control. He used to tell her, strength doesn't mean showing off. It means knowing you can, but choosing when you should. For years, they trained together in their backyard, at first just simple stretches, balance drills, and basic stances. As she got older, the training grew more serious. He taught her how to fall without hurting herself, how to move her weight so an opponent couldn't topple her easily, how to read body language and predict someone's next move. Sophie didn't see it as fighting, she saw it as preparation. Her dad never wanted her to be violent, but he wanted her to know that fear didn't have to own her. Those evenings training with him were some of her fondest memories. The grass cool under her sneakers, the fading sun painting the sky orange, his calm voice guiding her, again. Keep your feet light, don't let them lock you down. Remember, leverage beats size. At school, though, she never told anyone. To them, she was just Sophie, the cheerleader who smiled too much and never fought back. That was fine with her. Until the mockery started getting crueler. It began with little comments. Careful, Sophie, don't trip again. Then it escalated. Books knocked from her hands in the hallway, a hair tie snapped from her wrist with a smirk, a shove disguised as an accident during practice formations. She laughed it off in front of others, but deep down she could feel the line inching closer. She wanted to believe she could rise above it, that ignoring them would make them stop. But the truth was, bullies didn't stop when you gave them silence, they took silence as permission. Sophie had watched them for weeks, their smirks widening every time she held her tongue. And while she hated conflict, she hated something else more, the thought of becoming exactly what they thought she was, fragile, breakable, powerless. So, she kept reminding herself of her father's words. Every insult became another chance to practice control. Every shove became another test of her patience. But even patience has its limits, and Sophie could feel hers wearing thin. The breaking point came on a gray afternoon after practice. The gym smelled faintly of sweat and rubber mats, the sound of bouncing basketballs echoing from the court next door. Sophie had been tying her sneakers when she noticed them watching her again. 3 girls, standing together, whispering and giggling like they were planning something. She felt the familiar twist in her stomach, but she stood tall and ignored them. On her way out, as the crowd thinned and the echo of footsteps faded, she sensed them behind her. The mocking laughter followed her down the hall, low and sharp, like wolves circling. She quickened her pace, clutching her bag tighter, but she already knew what was about to happen. What the girls didn't know was that Sophie wasn't the same girl they thought they had cornered all semester. She had been preparing for this moment without realizing it. Every lesson, every drill, every calm reminder from her dad was still there, tucked into her muscles, waiting. And though she hoped she wouldn't have to use it, a small, steady voice inside her whispered that if they pushed her too far, she wouldn't crumble. She'd stand her ground. That voice carried her as she heard one of them call out, "Hey, Army Brat, where's your soldier daddy now?" The words echoed in the empty hallway, and Sophie's hands curled into fists, not of rage, but of resolve. Sophie was halfway down the hallway when the first shove came. It wasn't hard, more of a taunt than an actual attempt to knock her over, but it made her stumble just enough for the 3 of them to burst out laughing. The sound echoed through the nearly empty corridor, sharp and grating. Sophie straightened, clutching the strap of her bag, her pulse quickening. She reminded herself to breathe, just like her dad always said. Slow in, slow out. Don't let them see the panic. Look at her face, one of them sneered, stepping closer. She was the tallest of the trio, with a smirk that never seemed to leave her lips. Scared already? Daddy's not here to save you, huh? Sophie kept walking, hoping they'd get bored if she didn't react. But they weren't done. The tallest girl darted forward and yanked the bag from Sophie's shoulder, tossing it carelessly against the wall. The contents spilled, her notebook, water bottle, and a few pens clattering to the floor. Sophie froze, her heart pounding. She hated confrontation, hated the heat crawling up her neck, but something inside her snapped when she saw the deliberate cruelty in their eyes. She bent down to pick up her things, but before she could, the same girl grabbed her arm and yanked her upright. Where you going, army brat? We're not finished talking. Her grip was firm, nails biting into Sophie's skin. For the briefest moment, fear held Sophie in place. But then, like a flash, her father's voice returned. If someone lays hands on you and won't let go, don't panic. Control the moment. Your body knows what to do. And it did. Her free hand shot up, twisting at the girl's wrist exactly as she had practiced 100 times in her backyard. The girl let out a startled cry, stumbling as Sophie pivoted on her heel and redirected the pressure. The next thing Sophie knew, her tormentor was flat on the floor, clutching her wrist and staring up in shock. The sound of her body hitting the tile was loud, final. The hallway went still. The two others blinked at the scene, their smirks faltering. Sophie hadn't raised her voice, hadn't even looked angry. She had just moved with this calm, precise swiftness that none of them had expected. For a second, Sophie thought maybe that was enough, that they'd back off. But the smaller one lunged at her, shrieking, "You're gonna pay for that." Sophie stepped sideways, her reflexes sharper than her thoughts. The girl's hand swiped at air where Sophie had just been, and before she could recover, Sophie swept her leg lightly, just enough to knock her balance out from under her. Down she went, sprawling across the floor with a yelp, her hair fanning out around her. The last one hesitated, but pride seemed to override caution. She charged, both arms out like she meant to tackle Sophie. But Sophie had seen this move before. Her dad had made her practice escaping from it until her muscles ached. She dropped low, twisted at the last second, and used the girl's momentum against her. The cheerleader slammed into the lockers with a loud metallic clang, sliding down to the floor in a stunned heap. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Sophie's breathing was quick, but steady. She could feel the adrenaline buzzing through her veins, her hands trembling only slightly as she picked up her bag. She hadn't gone too far. She hadn't hurt them badly, just enough to stop them. Exactly as her father had taught her. She looked at the three of them, wide-eyed, stunned, their bravado shattered. For once, there were no taunts, no mocking grins. Just the sound of their shallow breathing filling the space. Sophie slung her bag over her shoulder and straightened. Her voice came out calm, almost quiet, but it carried down the hall like a command. Next time, don't touch me. The words weren't shouted. They weren't dripping with anger. They were steady, deliberate, like a promise. Sophie turned and began walking, her sneakers clicking softly on the tile. Behind her, the three girls didn't follow. They just sat there, stunned into silence, their laughter gone. For the first time, Sophie felt the strange, quiet power of standing her ground, not through cruelty, not through rage, but through control. And as she rounded the corner, the rush of adrenaline finally eased, replaced with something else, relief. Her father had been right all along. Strength wasn't about proving herself every second of the day. It was about knowing when to act, and acting without hesitation when the line had been crossed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The silence in that hallway was proof enough that they'd never see her the same way again. Sophie walked out of the hallway as if nothing had happened, though inside, her heart still raced like she'd just run a mile. Her hands tingled from the adrenaline, and her mind kept replaying the sound of bodies hitting the floor, the shocked gasps, the stillness that followed. She had never wanted to use what her dad taught her, but now that she had, she realized it hadn't been about fighting at all. It had been about reclaiming herself. The next morning, whispers trailed her the moment she stepped onto campus. Normally, whispers were the cruelest part of her day, sly jokes made just loud enough for her to hear, mocking laughter that spread faster than wildfire. But today, it was different. Heads turned when she passed. Conversations dropped into silence, only to pick up again in hurried tones after she moved by. She caught snippets here and there. "Did you hear? Took them all down. No way, Sophie. She's like, tiny. I swear, I saw it. She just..." Boom, they were on the ground. The three girls she'd faced yesterday were nowhere in sight during first period. When they finally showed up at lunch, their usual strut was gone. They kept their heads down, moving quickly, as if they wanted to slip past unnoticed. Sophie noticed. So did everyone else. Her friends at the cheer squad table stared at her like she was someone they'd never met before. One finally spoke up, hesitant. "Sophie, is it true? What you did yesterday?" Sophie paused, her tray still in her hands. She thought about what to say. She could deny it, brush it off, but that wasn't the truth. And for once, she didn't feel like hiding anymore. She set her tray down, sat with her usual quiet composure, and said simply, "They pushed too far. I defended myself." The table fell silent, eyes wide. No one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. Later that day, as practice began in the gym, Sophie felt every gaze land on her the moment she walked in. Normally, she would have shrunk under the weight of so much attention. But today, she straightened her shoulders and met their eyes. She didn't gloat, didn't smile smugly. She just stood with the same calm her father had taught her to carry. The three girls were there too, but their energy had shifted completely. They avoided her, their usual snickers replaced with awkward glances and nervous fidgeting. During stunts, they followed instructions without a word. When Sophie caught one of them falter, she steadied her just like she always did, firm but kind. And in that fleeting moment, the girl's eyes flicked up, a strange mix of shame and gratitude written across her face. By the end of practice, the dynamic had changed in a way Sophie hadn't expected. Nobody treated her like the fragile, easy target anymore. They moved around her with quiet respect, as if they were finally seeing her not as someone to mock, but as someone to reckon with. That night at home, Sophie sat on the porch steps with her dad, the air cool and heavy with the scent of grass. He had heard about the incident, of course he had. News traveled fast in a small town, especially when it involved cheerleaders and fights in school hallways. He didn't scold her. He didn't lecture. He just listened as she recounted what happened, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. When she finished, he sat back, arms folded, and gave her a small nod. "You remembered what I taught you," he said. Sophie nodded. "I didn't want to, but I couldn't just let them keep treating me like that." Her dad studied her for a moment, his eyes softening. "That's the point, kiddo. You didn't hurt them to hurt them. You stopped them because they crossed the line. That's the difference. That's strength." The words settled into her like warmth spreading through her chest. She hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. She hadn't lashed out in anger. She hadn't gone looking for a fight. She had simply refused to be powerless anymore. For the first time in a long while, Sophie felt lighter. Not because she had defeated anyone, but because she had proven something to herself, that she wasn't fragile, she wasn't breakable, and she wasn't alone. When she returned to school the next day, the whispers were still there. But now, they carried something new. Not mockery, not cruelty, awe, respect, and beneath it all, a quiet recognition. Sophie wasn't someone to be underestimated anymore. As she walked through the hallway, head held high, the memory of yesterday's silence echoed behind her. But this time, it wasn't heavy with fear. It was heavy with power. The kind that came from knowing exactly who you were, and never letting anyone take that away again.